Another week, another rival down. North Dakota State continues Missouri Valley play unbeaten after a 28-point barrage in the fourth quarter at Northern Iowa.
Stick stepping up. Bruce Anderson down the seam, and Anderson is off to the races. He is gone.
The Bison hope to pick up where they left off on offense this week against Western Illinois, and they're bringing a fresh mentality with them.
We're going to get everybody's best shot because we're ranked #1. But now this week, we kind of flipped the script. We're like, we're just going to give everybody our best shot.
The last time the Bison roamed in Macomb, Code Green made a statement with big play after big play. The matchup has provided plenty of fireworks in the recent past.
Stick will throw as a receiver open downfield. It's caught. What a catch!
And with the Leathernecks looking for a playoff resume builder, this week is shaping up to bring some more. It's football under the lights with the Leathernecks and the Bison next.
This is the Farmers Union Insurance Bison Football Pregame Show.
Hello and welcome into the Farmers Union Insurance Bison Football Pregame Show. Saturday night is all right for football if you're one of me. That's it for the Elton John references I've got for the show. That's it. That'll do it for the Elton John references.
Set the expectations like that.
Yeah, I know. I'm not having it. We've been waiting all day for this game. It's a weird one. The first time the Bison have played at night this season in 2018, and they have to go to a place that's not very easy to get to. It's not very enthusiasm filled. Is that a thing?
Nope. I don't think that's how you say it, but it certainly lacks an atmosphere, to say the least. But you know what? This isn't something that the Bison haven't done before. They've taken on. They've had a 6 o'clock start. They've had a 6 o'clock start at Western Illinois before. So this is some familiar territory. They have a routine for this. They know what they're doing. The only good side about this go-around is they aren't doing it in back-to-back weeks. 2 years ago when they did this, they had Northern Iowa, Western Illinois, 6 o'clock starts for both of them.
Yeah, that is a tough part there. But the Bison in control of the Missouri Valley Football Conference after 2 weeks of play in conference action. We take a look at the standings right now, and North Dakota State, the lone unbeaten in the conference. South Dakota State and Northern Iowa, both with one conference loss, courtesy of North Dakota State, the Bison there. Missouri State, how about them? Look at them, 3-2, sitting there at 1-1 in conference play. Illinois State, they beat Western Illinois last week to get that first conference win, and down there in the basement, a couple of surprise teams.
Indiana State put up a fight, though, against SDSU.
That they did. If you missed that one, that was an intense game. Indiana State took South Dakota State to overtime. Actually, they had a chance to win it in the overtime. They had first and goal from like the 1 yard line, and they weren't able to capitalize. So
this is what you expect to see, though, at this point in the season.
I would agree that this is where the Bison are supposed to be. This is where the rest of the conference is kind of supposed to be if you were to pick this out at the beginning of the season. We are going to get you out to Hanson Field in just a moment. But first, Beth, let's take a look at this game a little bit. And the Bison, they come in. We heard Dylan Radins there in the open. He said, you know, we get everybody's best shot. We always hear that we get everybody's best shot, and now they're kind of flipping how they're doing things. Yeah,
well, so what led to this is so much of the conversation amongst the media and maybe around town the last couple of weeks has been on that pulse of getting a fast start. Do we have a fast start? How do you get a fast start? Why aren't the Bison starting any faster? They're closing out these games, but they're not necessarily opening them up and building a lead on anybody in this conference action. And so, you know, Kleiman kind of downplayed it a little bit on Monday that, you know, you can't put that much stock in that. You've got to, you know, we're closing out games. We're winning football games. It's hard to win college football games. We hear him have that kind of same script over and over again. But what the players then told me on Tuesday and Wednesday this week was that Kleiman actually addressed that with them. And he said that it needs to be a point of emphasis, but maybe it's not necessarily getting a fast start, how do you get one, or any of that. It's changing their mentality. And that's where the idea that we know we get everybody's best shot, we're the Super Bowl for everybody every week. And so they've kind of been waiting back. They've been sitting back on their heels and thinking and adjusting to what people are going to do. Aaron Steidel said that, especially on the defense.
Yeah, you talked to Aaron Steidel and Dylan Radins, both guys on the lines. Let's take a listen to what those guys had to say this week.
Lately, we've been coming back trying to feel the defense or offensives out and like, oh, are they going to come out fast? Are they going to play this play that we practiced 10 times, you know, differently? Or So there's a lot of, just sitting back and waiting to see what's going to happen instead of just attacking it.
This week, we kind of flipped the script. And we're like, we're just going to give everybody our best shot. So we're going to see how that works. Hopefully it will work a lot better, give us a little bit more fire in our belly instead of, like Steidl said, just waiting to see what they're going to do and then attacking after that. So, yeah, we've had a few slow starts, but I feel like this week we'll get a fast one.
So a fast start is something that they obviously want to get to, but fourth quarter finish is not bad, coming from behind in the first two Missouri Valley Football Conference games and putting up, 28 points on Northern Iowa last week in the fourth quarter. So you don't want to lose that part of the game either.
No,
you want to finish
absolutely
strong.
not. But, a complete game, that would be nice.
You
can absolutely
whole
see that.
60 minutes.
And
Last
yes,
I checked, they played 60 minutes.
Yes, I remember those reminders from Chris Kleiman every week. Yeah, and Chris also said this week that how the lines play will determine how these games go, especially when it comes to value play. And both of those guys telling me they love that pressure.
Yeah.
They love having that on their shoulders, and they're proud to carry that burden for their team.
Offense and defensive line are always so crucial to any football team, very crucial to North Dakota State. Crucial to our team is a guy that's standing out there in the cold at Hanson Field in Macomb, Illinois. It is Ryan Gellner. Hey, Ryan, I see you have the gloves on. How's the weather out there treating you?
The weather is changing rapidly, guys. It is getting colder by the minute. We're still right around 40 degrees, but it feels a lot colder than that. The wind blowing at my back right now, and we'll see if that plays into the football game one direction or the other. North Dakota State, though, has been good at night. They have won 23 of their last 25 games under the lights in the last 8 years, and they have dominated Western Illinois, as you guys have talked about, winning 7 of 9 games, but 5 of those games have been decided by a touchdown or less. As you talked about, North Dakota State really wants to put together a complete game. Western Illinois, they haven't put together a complete game either. They have struggled in the fourth quarter to keep up with football teams, and that's kind of the storyline of today's game. Not only is it the lights and the cold and the weather, the lack of atmosphere that is Western Illinois, but it is putting together 4 quarters for each one of these football teams, and that, guys, is something to watch for out of both squads today.
All right, thank you very much, Ryan. We'll be checking in with you and the rest of the crew here as we move along in the pregame show. Something very interesting there that the wind is blowing a little bit. The Bison haven't played an outdoor game yet. I know we might make too much of this, but that's something to be said of that.
No, it's a real concern. There's quarterbacks that have to pass the ball to be successful. I think it definitely plays a factor for Western Illinois. They've got a quarterback who likes to go downfield, and it's a big part of their game plan. And everybody loves to see Easton go downfield. Now, obviously, the Bison can hunker down and run the ball and still win a football game, but I think they're going to have to pass the ball against Western Illinois, and it's going to play into this game, how they react to that and how Easton will throw in the win. Now, they did get to practice outside this week. And
snowed a little bit in Fargo this week. If
you know, it's how you look at it. Glass half full or half empty. But in all honesty, the fact that we did have those cold temperatures this week, well, we all maybe didn't enjoy them the most. That's good. That's good for this football team that they were able to practice in similar conditions and really be prepared for this.
Yeah, one of those things there. The weather, it always plays such a big factor, but the thing that you have to remember, both teams have to play in the same conditions. So you can use the weather as an excuse as much as you like, but you really can't because both teams have to do it. So just a battle of whoever gets it done as the weather goes along. We still have plenty to come here on the Farmers Union Insurance Bison Football pregame show. We'll learn a little bit more about the Leathernecks as Ryan Gellner catches up with the voice of the Leathernecks and so much more here to come. We've got just under an hour until kickoff. It's Saturday night football. Is that North Dakota tough or what? Like 40 degrees, got the cutoffs. Bison taking the field for warm-ups a few moments ago. A crisp evening in Macomb, Illinois. Mid-40s right now, a little wind, and hopefully they will not have to deal with any rain, and it sounds like they won't, at least unless this game goes 6 hours long, in which case they're going to have to deal with a lot more than just rain. They're going to deal with some angry people as well, having to sit through a 6-hour football game. Welcome back inside our Fargo studios, the Farmers Union Insurance Bison Football pregame show. We're getting you set for #1, unanimous #1, North Dakota State in both the coaches and the Stats FCS poll, going up against Western Illinois. They're just receiving votes, so no no ranked on ranked this week for North Dakota State, just receiving votes as Western Illinois. Let's learn a little bit more about the Leathernecks. Ryan Gellner catching up with the voice of the Leathernecks. Ryan?
Scott Kornberg is the play-by-play voice for Western Illinois, and Scott down on the field.
Yeah, as you can tell, I got 5 different layers on. It's a chilly day here today. It should get colder and colder as the night wears on, but it should be fun. It's great football weather for sure.
As Sean McGuire goes, the quarterback for Western, who sets all sorts of records here, as he goes, Western seems to go as well.
No doubt. They're a team that's dominated by star power. Obviously, Sean at quarterback is phenomenal. He's as good as they come in this league. And obviously, that Easton Stick and Taryn Christian and some of the other quarterbacks are phenomenal. But he's in that bracket. And Steve McShane, Colin Saunders, those star players are critical for Western Illinois today.
It has been North Dakota State football of old. When the Bison get going, it's been the running game that has done it. How does Western's defense stack up against the Bison?
Well, this defense has actually played pretty well this year, Ryan, and they've got really good players at every single level. I think the key for this game for the defense is, weirdly enough, coming from their offense. They've got to be able to run the football better than they have, eat up clock, because this defense, while it's played really well, has worn down in the fourth quarter quite a bit this year, and that's a huge concern today against a really physical and clock-eating team like North Dakota State.
Had a nice lead a week ago and then weren't able to pull it off. But with that said, I would assume the Leathernecks have a little bit of confidence coming in here.
They do. This is a good football team. They're not at the top of the league like the Bison are or South Dakota State, but I think you can make a case there at that next bracket down. They had a really rigorous non-conference schedule, so that 2-3 record is maybe a little bit misleading. But they're a solid team. They've been in literally every single game, and unfortunately for them, they've blown a lot of late leads. So that is a big thing to play a complete game today.
Stay warm in your heated booth there, bud.
I will. Thank you so much, Ryan. Best of luck.
Guys, back to you.
All right. Thank you so much, Ryan. He mentioned the fourth quarter. They gave up 21 points last week to Illinois State to lose that game in the fourth quarter, just like the Bison were able to put up a ton of points in the fourth quarter against Northern Iowa.
Yeah. Yeah, it's an important part of the full 60 minutes.
Full 60 minutes. That's what they play.
I feel like Chris would be really proud to know what I've taken away from my time on the sidelines with him.
60-minute football game.
60-minute football games. Yeah, it's a really important part of this. I think what's really interesting about this Western Illinois football team. Who are they playing? Western Illinois football team. They've got this great quarterback, and he's really easy to talk about, but they've got some great running backs as well. And as much as he likes to go downfield, they are, and they have been, really able to have a balanced attack when they're having success, and that's coming from these running backs. They've got Max Norris, who's kind of their tough yards guy. He doesn't necessarily have a ton of yards on the season, but he's getting those tough, work through the middle kind of yards. And then they've got Steve McShane, and he's kind of the go-to guy. He's the upperclassman. He's got 274 yards, 44 carries for this team, and he's a guy that likes to go east, or he's a guy that can really get downfield. If you let him get going, he busted open for 75 yards on one rush against Youngstown State, which is a team that prides themselves on their defense. But he's one of those guys, you've got to force him east-west if you're going to have any success in shutting him down.
Well, McShane is obviously one of the guys that the Bison are going to have to keep their eye on because, as you mentioned, he's not only a threat out of the backfield, but he's also their leading receiver on the team as well.
Minor detail.
He gets things done, and he's not bad on special teams either. So he gets things done in a
kind of like a Bruce
of different
Anderson
ways. Yeah, that's a great way to look at it. He is a Bruce Anderson. Doesn't have as many yards as Bruce Anderson, but they don't run the football that much. It's a pass-first team.
Absolutely.
That Western Illinois brings to the table. And Sean McGuire, their quarterback, as we've seen now, we're just dealing with all these quarterbacks that have experience, that have been in this league a while, that now these defenses, they have a book on, but these quarterbacks, just like any defense, they're going to evolve their game a little bit.
Gosh,
and
the Valley's going to be weird next year.
It's going to be very weird next year.
Yeah.
You lose, Christian, no McGuire, excuse me, no Easton Stick. Yeah. It's going to be very, very different. And
speaking of potential new faces, not to jump into next year, but there's a lot of new faces on this Western Illinois football team as well. They've brought in 34 new guys this season. Now, of course, 24 of those are freshmen, but they've got 10 transfers as well that are trying to get involved in this offense and defense and try and make an impact on this team. And I think that's maybe what you've seen a little bit of out here in their inability. I think some of it's conditioning, but I think some of it is also they're just still trying to get on the same page with each other.
Well, and it's also, that's what happens when you have a coaching staff that leaves, after their year last year. This was a playoff team last year that kind of maybe unjustly got put in a bracket against Weber State in the first-round game against Weber State. So Charlie Fisher, he bolts and takes a wide receiver's job at Arizona State. So now Jared Elliott is in there for his first year as Western Illinois' head coach. So you're going to see a little bit of that turnover.
And he had been the offensive coordinator. Yeah, he had been the offensive coordinator last year. He got promoted from within, and yeah, it's a new system. Well, it's the same offense, but he's an offensive-minded guy, which they've had there. We were looking this up there. Have always kind of been an offensive-minded football team the last couple of years, the last couple of coaching staffs at Western Illinois, which I think brings an interesting component to this football game as well. There's so many of these teams within the Missouri Valley have defensive-minded head coaches, and I think it makes an interesting component to the football game, and I'm interested to see how it breaks down. And
the other thing that you're going to have to contend with is you like to throw the ball a little bit. They play outside. The wind is blowing, as we've been told, and it's not really great football gripping conditions. So you're going to have to be on your game tonight to make sure that you can make the offense go if you're Sean McGuire and this Western Illinois offense. We're going to take a break. When we come back, we will hear who's in and who's not for the Bison. The injury report kind of building up as the weeks go along.
Yeah, getting to that part of the season.
Yeah, that's what happens, especially after our Northern Iowa game. That's still to come here on the Farmers Union Insurance Bison Football Pregame Show.
Red shirt.
Red shirt.
Shotgun formation.
One more time.
Shotgun formation.
No idea.
Special teams.
Spencer Wagey.
Special teams.
Special teams.
Thunder.
Thunder. Thundar.
Thunder. Thundar. Whatever. Fargo Dome.
Fargo Dome.
Delay of game. Delay of game. On Bison.
Offsides.
On Bison.
Auto bomb.
On Bison.
Audible.
Yellow and green. Oh, shoot.
So off. Was I so off on a couple of those? Dude, you're bad. That's not on me. That's on you. You can't stop staring at your teeth, all of them in your mouth at once. I don't even know what to look at.
Oh, my God.
How dare he have all those teeth?
I can't. I've seen that like 6 times. I edited that.
It's the eyebrows.
The eyebrows from Nate Jensen.
Spencer Wagey.
Shout out Spencer Wagey.
Shout out Spencer Wagey.
For special teams. That was great. Nate Jensen with another phenomenal version of the Whisper Challenge.
Yes.
There. Let's get back onto today's game. The Bison taking on Western Illinois. Let's go back out to Hanson Field. And Ryan Gellner standing by with our Sanford Orthopedics and Sports Medicine injury report.
Dr. Ben Noonan is on the road trip this week, and Doc, we are going to talk a little bit about ribs because a common football injury is a shot to the upper torso area, and that is where the ribs are, and that can be a problem for some players.
Yeah, it sure can. You know, anytime you're talking about an injury or a blow to the chest or the abdomen, the first thing we want to do is make sure there's not something more serious going on with the structures underneath, the heart, the lungs, the organs in the abdomen. So, you know, big red flags for any injury or any athlete would be chest pain, shortness of breath, a really rigid abdomen. Those kind of things we would have evaluated urgently. Then once you're certain there's nothing like that going on, you start to figure out, well, what's hurting? And the ribs are a common culprit, and trying to diagnose if it's a fracture or a bruise can be a little difficult. Sometimes we'll use x-rays to help us figure that out. The ribs are actually both bone and cartilage. And if it's a fracture of the bony part of the rib, that will show up on a chest x-ray or a rib x-ray. Now, more around the front, when it turns into more cartilage, that can be a little tougher. And sometimes if an athlete isn't coming along like we think they should, we'll even get a CT scan to look at the cartilage portion. But actually, a minimally displaced rib fracture or a really bad bruise is treated really the same way. I mean, relative rest, ice, after a few days, some anti-inflammatories, and then really just a slow progression of activities. It can be 2 to 6 weeks, though. I mean, all of the muscles of the abdomen attached there, and then with football, all of the impact, it really is gauged by the athlete's symptoms.
As a preventative measure, your quarterbacks actually at North Dakota State, they wear the old flak jacket.
Yeah, it's a pretty common thing for quarterbacks at all level. They're in a very exposed position, and you know, the defensive players can come in and lay a pretty good hit on them. And they work really well to spread out the impact on the force and try to reduce the rate of rib injuries, but we definitely use them with our quarterbacks.
Either way, they are painful, not fun to experience, and we certainly hope we don't see any rib injuries today. Thank you so much for your time, sir.
You're welcome.
Back to you guys.
All right, thank you very much to Ryan and to Dr. Noonan. Let's take a look at the injury report today. Ty Brooks, who missed last week's game, as did Noah Gindorf. We're not sure on Noah's injury, but everybody's listed as questionable. Jalen Wimbush and Desmond Kane got hurt in the Northern Iowa game. We do have some good news to report from our cameras out there at Hanson Field and Macomb. Ty Brooks is warming up with the running backs right now, so it looks like he might be available today. Still officially listed as questionable on the Sanford Orthopedics and Sports Medicine injury report.
And one of the things Kleiman said about some of these injuries was, as much as you want to have some of these guys back, you also have to think big picture. And so this is kind of one of those situations where, while Ty Brooks might be out there and while he might be good enough to go if they needed him, they might not need him. So you might not have to see him. You might get to hold on to him for a little bit longer.
It would be nice to be able to get this game done with Lance and Bruce again.
Yeah, you got to keep those bodies as fresh as possible. But then on the opposite side, obviously, if you're putting that much on Lance and Bruce, it's kind of just a balancing act for them.
Wear and tear. That's one of the things that these coaching staffs have to deal with all the time. Let's take a look at the quarterbacks that will be playing in today's game. Start with the Bison. Easton Stick, 851 passing yards, 56.3% completion percentage. The number that looks great to me, 9-1 touchdowns to interceptions. He's also got 7 rushing touchdowns. Kid is just finding the end zone.
Yeah, and that's something that Kleiman said he had to remind Mess of at the end of last week's game. You know, don't forget, we've got some of this quarterback run stuff that we can still get to. Yeah. We can still get to it.
Still get to it, even though the Bison were doing just fine with that.
I'm loving watching him run the football, though. They're so, I mean, look at that. The passion and the excitement in there, the energy he's bringing to it. I'm loving it. I'm loving everything about Easton Stick this season.
I think that's what I've enjoyed the most, is seeing his reaction to scoring touchdowns this year. I think before we saw a much more subdued Easton Stick after he scored a touchdown, you know, the act like you've been there before. But
which I'm okay with.
Like that. Just the fiery passion. He had a little bit of that at Northern Iowa. Mixing it up with a defensive back there in the end zone. So it's been great to see Easton Stick run the football and get into the end zone.
I love it. He's going to have to keep his head on a swivel this week. Western Illinois has an outside linebacker, Pete Swenson. He leads the Missouri Valley Football Conference, and he's tied for 5th in the nation with 10 tackles for loss right now. And I think he's somebody who's going to be gunning for Easton Stick this weekend.
The offensive line definitely has their work cut out for them. Let's take a look on the other side of the equation. We talked about him a little bit. Sean McGuire, a senior quarterback, 1,344 passing yards through 5 games for.
He's a record holder at the school now, and for good reason.
Yeah, he's doing all right. Not much of a running quarterback, a runner. Minus 13 yards there. He gets sacked a bit, and he doesn't take off. He's a pocket passer. He's a guy that the Bison will definitely have to get to. Greg Menard, Derek Tuska, Stanley Jones, all those guys are going to have to make sure that they do not give him plenty of time to survey the field, because he will pick you apart if he's given enough time.
Yeah, he really likes to go downfield, and that's something about this Western Illinois offense. They're going to run the bubble screens. They're going to run the Wildcat. Kleiman said they can really nickel and dime you, but they like to go downfield, and he said that he expects this to be the greatest challenge on NDSU's secondary that they've had yet this season. And that's a tall task when you think about some of the quarterbacks that they've gone up against.
So Taryn Christian that you're throwing in that mix.
Yeah, absolutely. And Kleiman says that he's really enjoyed watching Sean McGuire, and that he's somebody that he really likes watching, except when he's across the field from him. This is somebody he likes to watch on film.
Just to watch it,
because he's entertaining to watch, and he's so good. But I think something that's working against McGuire this season is, like I mentioned in our last segment, there's so many new faces out there, and I think he's trying to do too much. Right now, he's on pace to have the most interceptions he's had in his career. He's got 6 already. He's thrown at least 1 in every game except for against Youngstown State, which is kind of shocking to me.
That is shocking, actually.
But he's on pace, and I think it's that factor of he's trying to do too much. When they're losing control in those late games, I just think it's working against him. I think if he can calm down and kind of find his piece and work with what he has, he's going to have a much better success rate. And I think it's at that point of the season where you could see him finding that. That's the part I'm really interested in seeing, is how he comes out and plays in this game. Because if he can kind of control those things, control what he can control, like we hear them say so often, I think you could see really the best Sean McGuire we've ever seen.
And the Bison will have to keep their eye out for Steve McShane as well, the running back, receiver, return man extraordinaire. He's one of McGuire's top options. Is it a little chilly in here for you? We could probably have them kick up the heat a little bit in here.
Oh, that's a nice benefit of being inside.
It is great being inside, and our guys are not inside. They're outside, and we're going to go to them next at Hanson Field when we return here on the Farmers Union Insurance Bison Football Pregame Show.
This is the Farmers Union Insurance Bison Football Pregame Show.
North Dakota State is under the lights in Macomb. It is a chilly day in Macomb, but it should shape up to be a good football game as North Dakota State takes on Western Illinois. Brian Shawn will call today's game. Lee Timmerman is here to provide the analyst in today's game. My name is Ryan Gellner, and in all fairness, these guys just dropped the gloves, and I decided to keep mine on.
What gloves are you talking about?
Those gloves.
Okay.
It's a lot chillier than it feels, and the wind at times makes it feel like it's a winter instead of a fall day.
Yeah, it's cooler actually than I thought 47 degrees would feel. The winds are supposed to go down a little bit before kickoff, and I'm still trying to adjust to the speaker system they have that operates out of the back of a U-Haul. Pardon me if I'm trying to get my thoughts together as this all happens.
You brought it up. The atmosphere here is unusual.
It certainly is. It's fall break as well. You guys probably talked a little bit about that. So the student presence from Western's side of things probably won't be here as much as well. And there's really, truth be told, there's only one reason why this game is being played at night is because Western wants to make it as difficult as possible for the Bison football team, and that's playing at night with all the travel deals.
Western isn't a terrible football team. They have been in some football games. They've won some football games that maybe outsiders don't think they should. Sean McGuire at quarterback is really good, and he keeps them in football games.
Yeah, McGuire, with 4 new starters in the offensive line, has had to take on an added responsibility this year of making all the protection calls. And really, he's a guy that tries to keep plays alive with his legs. And sometimes he will make some questionable decisions down the field just to try to make a big play. Sometimes it works. Sometimes it has not worked. So we'll see how much pressure North Dakota State gets on them early, because Western has not been able to run the ball consistently all year.
Let's get into our Dakota Magic and Casino keys to the football game for today's football game. And we start with better defense. And Lee, for the Bison, it starts with communications, and it starts with very simple. They need to tackle.
They certainly need to tackle a little bit better. If you remember at the beginning of the game last week, boom, just like that first touchdown. Well, I was talking with Coach Klanderman about that, and he said not only was that kid not covered, he was supposed to be double covered. That's how much the Bison did not communicate early. Things settled down. They did not make a lot of changes, believe it or not, at halftime. They just simply played much better and simplified things a little bit, trying, in effect, to play a little bit faster.
Number 2, Brian, it's a lot easier when you're not playing from behind. The last 2 weeks, the Bison have fallen behind early in football games.
Yeah, for whatever reason, I think sometimes a veteran group can approach the game like a coach and wants to feel out an opposing offense or defense instead of going in attack mode. Marquise Bridges, Blake Williams, Aaron Steidel all said it this week when we talked to them. We want to come out and make them worried about us, not other way around. So I would expect North Dakota State to be more aggressive, especially in the first 2 series of the game.
Number 3 on our Dakota Magic and Casino keys to the football game is someone has to make a big play. And the Bison have done that when they needed that. Against UNI, it was Bruce Anderson with that 75-yard run and catch. And then against South Dakota State, it was Shepard with the 41-yard catch. Lee, the Bison have to have their playmakers making plays.
I love on the play to Anderson. That was a thing that the Bison have not showed anyone yet. And I think Coach Messingham and the offensive staff so far have done a pretty good job of saving a few wrinkles. Will we see some of those wrinkles tonight? I think so. They got a few things that the NDSU coaching staff wants to show Western that nobody else in the league has seen yet this year.
Western offensively, Brian, will do a little bit of movement. They'll do sweeps and things that North Dakota State hasn't seen a lot of that the Bison know they need to prepare for today.
Yeah, they like to try to track the perimeter mainly because I don't think they feel like they can run in between the tackles. They got 3 redshirt linemen. They just have not been able to move the line of scrimmage. But what we have seen is a guy like Steve McShane. He has not had any blocking, and he can make 3 or 4 guys miss and still take it to the house 75 yards. So he's a dangerous guy when he gets out into space. So NDSU has to be really good in their gap control, especially outside in the perimeter runs.
Lee, we joked about it earlier, but elements are one thing, but playing in this place, and this is a live shot, and as you can see, there might be 500 people here.
There's a little bit of a tailgate going on. There'll be more fans than this, obviously, but
it's hard to play college football when you have to create your own energy.
And you do that by making big plays. Some of those big plays you talked about on the offensive side, if you can get something there, a big hit on a 3rd and short or something like that from the defense to help things get going. But, yeah, you know, the Bison have talent. Western has talent. The games here have a tendency to be close. Western's, Brian touched on it, Western's offensive line is not good. Look for the Bison to maybe heat some things up on 3rd down and long in passing situations, something they did not do much last week, which I thought they'd do more of. I think you'll see more of that blitz style, go after McGuire more tonight than we saw last week.
It'll be fun to see McGuire, one of the best quarterbacks in the league, along with Easton Stick. We'll see if the Bison can pin their ears back, like you said, Lee, get after him specifically on 3rd down. Lots to come on our pregame show, including the game, which is about 29 minutes away. We'll talk to the Bison head coach, Chris Kleiman, when we come back. Western Illinois takes on North Dakota State. It is under the lights with a 6 o'clock kickoff coming your way this evening. It is time now for Herdline News. What's new with North Dakota State University football? Well, it starts with the quarterback this week. 4th-year starter Easton Stick is 39-3 as NDSU's starting quarterback. He's moved into 3rd place on the NDSU career list for passing attempts, completions, and yards. Sticks ranks 2nd in NDSU history with 69 passing touchdowns, now just 3 behind the legendary Brock Jensen, who had 72 from 2010 to 2013. Stick accounted for 6 touchdowns last week at Northern Iowa, and for his efforts, he was named the Missouri Valley Football Conference Offensive Player of the Week. It is the 2nd time in 3 weeks that Stick has won that award, and the 3rd time in his career. Easton and that Bison offense, they'll have to be good today, especially if the Bison want to get going early on. We talked to head coach Chris Kleiman about his awesome Bison offense. Chris, the offense continues to get it done. Easton playing at a high level.
Yeah, it really is, and we have to continue that. I told the guys this week, what you did last week has no bearing on what you're going to do this week. We have a new challenge and another great front 7 that we'll have a tough time trying to dent, but we have to be able to be successful offensively.
Defensively, you were slow coming out of the gate last couple of weeks. What have you done to shore that up?
Well, we're trying to simplify some things probably and just follow our rules and principles and not maybe try to defend everything and do what we do really well.
First game outside, under the lights tonight, in weather that's not real beautiful. How do you adjust to that?
Well, we were outside on Wednesday in Fargo when it was sleet and snow and ice, so this is dry and a little breezy, but our guys are going to be just fine.
Finally, the atmosphere here in Macomb isn't always that great. You add to it, the students are on break. Tough to create energy.
Well, there's no excuses for our guys. We talked about it on Monday, put the elephant out there and said, guys, you're going to have to create it all. You're on your own. This is what college football is about. A bunch of guys coming together on the road, rallying behind each other, and we need to play good football tonight.
Good luck this week.
Appreciate it. Thanks.
And that is a live look at the Leatherneck home sideline. That is live. And the atmosphere here, not real good. We will send it back to our Fargo studios to wrap up as we get set for football. There's a football game 24 minutes from right now, right here on this very network.
Okay, so this is a live look at Hansen Field. We're looking at the Bison sideline. They say that Hansen Field holds 18,000 people. I'm guessing they're not going to get that tonight.
But has it ever?
Probably. We can't rag on them that much. But we've been told that there are more Bison fans in attendance at this one than there are Western Illinois. And again, you have to take into consideration the students are on fall break. That doesn't help anything. The weather's not the best. Western Illinois.
Some people might still be tailgating.
You could still be tailgating.
But I bet there's some Bison fans still tailgating as well. Honestly, this isn't surprising to me. I've made this trip with the Bison football team before. The parents, the fans travel very well no matter where they are.
Right.
and this is kind of an unfair advantage. Given 2 years ago, when we were out there, the Cubs were playing in the World Series.
That's right.
And so there was nobody. They thought it would be a great contender, a 6 p.m. under the lights against the #1 team in the nation, and then the Cubs played in the World Series.
I also heard that they were doing something this week, and I guess I don't know this for a fact, but one of the groups that's out there decided to throw like a beer festival or something. So I don't know if that's where everybody went to, but I can't imagine.
Again, the Bison will be.
I love that our director keeps taking this full screen.
Again, though, the Bison will have to make their own atmosphere, but that's something they knew they would have to do. And there's one of the things that Chris talked about this week and will help in that situation is they have so much senior leadership and they have so many guys that won't allow that to be an excuse for them.
All right, let's take a look at who we think needs to have an impactful game today. Our Bobcat heavy lifting report, and we've decided to single out the 2 Bison corners, Jalen Allison and Marquise Bridges. Marquise with an interception last week that really got the Bison going offensively and really shut down what Northern Iowa's attack. So we have in here limit McGuire. We know that McGuire likes to throw the football, likes to take some chances down the field. So these guys are going to have a little bit more responsibility to shut down what McGuire has. And I also put in there to force tough throws, because this McGuire kid, again, he will pick you apart if you give him enough time. So you got to be able to make sure that if he is going to make a throw, it needs to be a tough one. And then the third one is just tackle, tackle, tackle. I don't think you can say that enough about any defensive player.
Yeah, no, absolutely not. And well, I mean, I said it earlier, Chris said it on Monday. This is going to be the biggest test for the Bison secondary that they've had all season. And those 2 guys are a big part of it. Also included in that is the big question mark of Wimbush. And whether or not he'll be there. And last week, the Bison had a little bit of an adjustment period that was very evident in the game. Well, they kind of tried to make some adjustments when he left the game with that injury, and they ended up, playing with whether or not they pull Grimsley, they pull Hendricks. But Kleiman's saying that he doesn't want to have to do that because he doesn't want to pull them from places where they are so good. And so it's kind of the cause and effect and how it kind of shakes out the rest of the defense. He mentioned bringing Bridges, he mentioned bringing Allison, he mentioned Jackson Brown, and then moving Jabril Cox to the inside to see if and that's kind of what they ended up doing last week against Northern Iowa, which worked.
So to your point, what the Bison had to do last week was stay in their base defense. They were never allowed to go into that nickel formation because Jalen Wimbush got hurt, and those guys, as you said, stayed in their spots. You didn't move a Rob Grimsley or a James Hendricks to a different spot and play that nickel defense. So the Bison were in base defense for pretty much the entire game against Northern Iowa. And that's why Northern Iowa was able to get some stuff going there in that first half.
That was a little bit frustrating to see. And I think the fans, you would never like to see that, especially against Northern Iowa. But it affects the Bison defense. And another big part that has affected this Bison defense has been communication.
Yeah.
And that's something that we've kind of been harping on. And I say we as in the media across the board, whether you're watching the other guys or not, everybody's talking about the communication of this defense, and it's been frustrating for the Bison defense as well.
What was it, 2 weeks ago during the South Dakota State game, we heard Ryan Gellner on the sideline saying they cannot hear each other on defense. They're having a tough time communicating with each other. And while you may think that, a defense is called and that call is, hey, go tackle the guy with the football, that's not always the case. Obviously, that's the goal, but that's not the case. You have places where you need to be. You have places where you expect other guys to be at the same time. So that's what's important. And if you're not communicating that chain of command, if that game of telephone is getting broken down somewhere, that means the whole defense is thrown off.
Yeah, and Aaron Steidel really being honest about it this week and talking about how frustrating it's been for this team. But there's also a level of understanding that needs to be taken in this, because you have to remember Nick DeLuca is no longer back there. Matt Plank is no longer back there making these calls, and it really does start with that middle linebacker. And there's nothing against Dan Marlette right now. It's just thrust him into a new position, and he had a little bit of experience there last year with some of those injuries. But it's a whole different ball game right now, and when you add in the noise factors and when you add in playing some of and the heightened level of competition as quickly as it came at them, there's, South Dakota State changes a lot more on their offense and disguises some things and can do a lot more against you than Cal Poly was or than North Alabama was. So it's just kind of been catching up with all of them, but they're frustrated and they've been working on it. And it was a serious point of emphasis this week in practice, according to Aaron Steidel.
Yeah, and that's what Aaron Steidel had to say to you. And again, going back to that mentality as well, as we're not going to let the game come to us. We're going to take the game to the opposing team. Here's what Aaron had to say.
you know, that's one of our focuses this week. Instead of just waiting back in the shadows, is really coming out and trying to be the first punch in the face and, you know, stop them on a 3rd and out right away.
So the Bison, they gave up that big play on the 3rd play from scrimmage against Northern Iowa last week, and again, as a fan, you don't want to see that. You don't want to see your team go down into a hole. But what's great to see is that the Bison don't panic. They haven't panicked yet, and they've been able to overcome those early little hiccups and come back and get W's these last couple weeks.
Yeah, and Chris was asked about that this week as well. You know, having to have that 4th quarter, you know, stand. There's 2 back-to-back weeks. They've been playing 4-quarter football games against Missouri Valley Football Conference teams, and he said, you know, that's kind of what you expected. I also learned my team won't panic, and that's an important skill to have already been able to pick up well before you get into the playoffs when everything's on the line. And this team, I don't think, has any panic in them, which is really cool to see.
And to go back to your point that you made previously, senior leadership. That's what it is relying on, is senior leadership being there and being able to make sure that this ship does not go haywire when something does. So that's a huge component, and the Bison are so very lucky to have that. Thank you for adding to that. I appreciate that. All right, we have
you complimented my point. I didn't want to pat myself on the back, but
that's fair. We have 9 minutes and 45 seconds now on our Coors
I don't
Light
have a lot
countdown
to
clock.
celebrate today, so I appreciate that.
Okay, quick aside from the Bison game. Beth is a Nebraska alum, and her Cornhuskers are 0-6. They did not fare too well.
I wiped the tears away before we got out here.
I know, I wasn't going to say anything, but if you want to, I'm a Northern Colorado alum.
Who?
Exactly, and my football team has not won a football game yet this year either. I'm pretty sure we still have a program, but that's, who knows? Who knows? It's been tough sailing as a Bears fan.
Bring my spirits up, Bison.
Yeah, we need the Bison to really rally the troops here for us. There's some folks that look like they're ready to rally the troops out there in Macomb, chilly Macomb.
Look how well they travel.
Yeah, look at that. Bison Nation always does a good job. 9 minutes on our Coors Light Countdown clock. When we come back, we'll get our final thoughts from the guys and get you out to some football. That's still to come here on the Farmers Union Insurance Bison Football Pregame Show.
This is the Farmers Union Insurance Bison Football Pregame Show.
Just over 6 minutes to go on our Coors Light Countdown clock before we send you out to Macomb, Illinois, and the North Dakota State Bison taking on the Western Illinois Leathernecks. That's a tough one to say. Don't do that at home.
It's like rivalry week.
I'm not even. I can't do it.
We're past them. It's okay.
We are past those. Every game's a rivalry, though. The Bison. We talk a little bit about the line of scrimmage that the Bison have right now. The Bison lead the Missouri Valley Football Conference with 18 sacks. They are 6th in the FCS, averaging just over 3.5 sacks a game. And then on the flip side, the offensive line, they are 1st in the league with sacks allowed. They've only given up 4 sacks this year, and rushing offense averaging over 280 yards a game. So this line, the Bison lines, we've heard Chris Kleiman, and I even got it unprovoked from him a couple weeks ago. You know, how do you continue on in Missouri Valley Football Conference play? And his line always has been, as our offense and defensive line goes, that is how the Bison will go. We talked to an offensive and defensive lineman this week, and we got their input on it, and they had some great things to say about that pressure that's put on them.
Yeah, well, they take a lot of pride in that, and Dylan Radens, of course, saying that offensive line coach Connor Riley is always he used the word harping on us about that. And that we have to be on point, and that we really determine how this all plays out. He also, kind of a fun side note, mentioned we were talking to him about the running backs and how nice it is to have such stout running behind them. You know, if they are aware whether or not it's Lance or Bruce, and if they try and keep it even, or are aware of who's coming through the hole. And Dylan said, no, I have no idea. I get the call.
He's
and
so
I
focused
and
on what
I'm
he's
focused
doing.
on who I'm going for.
Who do I need to block?
But afterwards, he's
no
like,
idea.
yeah, he's like, afterwards we'll see the stats and be like, oh wow, Lance has 5 touchdowns. We should have given Bruce one of those, you know. Kind of see that all play out. But they take a lot of pride in it. They have a lot of fun with it, and I think that's why you see so much success for them. It's not pressure. It's expectation, and they thrive under that.
And the Bison doing a good job. They moved the football effectively on the ground. They had, for the first time this season, 2 guys go up over 100 yards rushing with Bruce and Lance last week against Northern Iowa. So the offensive line starting to find their rhythm a little bit. Will they find their rhythm tonight? That's to be seen in the cool breeze that is out there at Macomb, Illinois. Let's go back out to Macomb, Illinois, and we'll get the guys' final thoughts.
For me, it's a couple of things. First one, North Dakota State playing outside for the first time all season long. How will the Bison adjust not only to the temperature, but to the atmosphere here at Western Illinois, which is, well, not very good.
All right, I think my final thoughts going into this game is to see if the NDSU special teams units can generate a big explosive play on a return. Western Illinois has struggled a little bit covering kicks and punts. Maybe Bruce Anderson or Darius Shepard can have a big play in special teams to set up NDSU on a short field.
My final thoughts are basically concerning both the starting offensive and defensive teams for both sides, but you take each unit, and if you tried to stack them from the best to the worst of those units, the Western offensive line is the worst part of the for either team. And the last time at the top of my head I can think of that NDSU was beaten by a poor offensive line is when Brock Jensen threw a couple of pick sixes against Indiana State. Will that happen tonight? I don't know. That's what we get to watch for. Is it likely? Probably not.
All right, thank you very much, guys. LT throwing Brock Jensen some shade there.
That was a tough game.
That was a tough game. All right, what I'm interested to see tonight for North Dakota State is their ability to capitalize on turnovers. The Bison.
You thief!
Oh, really?
Yes! Well, I agree with you.
We should have talked about this.
We should have talked about this. I completely agree with you. Sorry, finish your thought.
Okay, but their ability to capitalize on turnovers. The Bison lead the conference with 49 points off of turnovers so far. McGuire turns the ball over. He's thrown 6 interceptions this year. Now you say.
And the Bison need to capitalize on those. Absolutely. I 100% agree with you. I think that is the determining factor in this game. I think that the Bison will win that turnover battle, and I think they will be the ones to capitalize off of it. They're prone to it already this season. They've shown they can do it. They're not hungry for it. They know they can do it. They've got confidence in it.
What's been encouraging for the Bison is if one side of the ball isn't isn't playing its best football to start or to finish a game, the other side of the ball is taking care of that. We've seen the Bison back-to-back weeks, South Dakota State and Northern Iowa, where the defense really made a big play and sprung the offense and got the offense kind of jump-started. We saw that with Jalen Allison's interception in the end zone against South Dakota State. We saw it with Marquise Bridges' interception against Northern Iowa. And on the flip of that, the offense is doing their job and capitalizing on those turnovers. Again, 49 points off of turnovers. That's huge. They've only I think they're only +5.
I think we see Jabril Cox get back in there.
See Jabril Cox?
I think we see his third pick six of the season.
McGuire has been known to throw an interception or two. We've got a minute left on the Coors Light countdown clock before we send you out to Macomb and the Bison running onto the field. I can tell you, yellow helmet, white jersey, green pant, in case you were curious, the aesthetics of the Bison. There's a code green issued next week. What that means, we
will find out. Yeah, one person I do want to put on everybody's radar is their strong safety, number 30, Justin Fitzpatrick. He's a two-sport athlete. I wrote down watching their game against Youngstown State. I put the dude. Because he's so athletic and he's so good. Just somebody to keep your eye on that Western Illinois defense. You know, we talked a lot about kind of their offensive guys. He's somebody that I'm excited to see if he can, as a football fan, excited to see if he can make an impact in this game.
And it'll be interesting to see how the Bison take care of him and make sure that he doesn't have an impact on this game.
Yeah, well, you know, if he can have any success if anybody can have some success against Darius Shepard, I think he might be the guy if somebody finally decides to mark him.
Well, that'll do it for the pregame show. Football now.